Good afternoon. I'm Flip Pideaux. It is July 26th. This is Polymarket Insiders, and this is the thrilling conclusion to our trilogy of crypto episodes featuring Avi Eisenberg. Two of the markets we've been covering in this trilogy are about to expire. One is just about wrapped up in terms of the remaining risk, but the other is still very much in play. And so Avi's got an update for you today on how you want to play it. I'm glad you're with us. Now let's get to it. All right, welcome back to Polymarket Insiders, folks, here on Old Bull TV Network. If you're not already, please follow us on Twitter and join the conversation there where our DMs are open. We are Old Bull TV on Twitter. And if you get the occasion to join us live, this episode we're taping a couple hours before we air it, but we often tape them, or I often air them live. So if you subscribe to the channel while you're hearing it, that little bell notification, you'll get notified each time we do go live. And when we are live, you're able to ask your questions live here in the chat window for guests and hosts alike to respond in real time. But again, for today, please send any feedback or questions or future recommendations on guests or market coverage to us on Twitter at Old Bull TV. With that, I want to get right to our guest today. He is Avi Eisenberg, very familiar to those of you who are our repeat viewers and those of you active on Polymarket in the Discord server and elsewhere. He's been following this pair of crypto markets and helping us break them down on a pretty regular basis now these last couple of weeks. As I mentioned, this is our third episode with him for our third in-depth look in as many weeks. And for a really brief recap, we're going to get in-depth on both of these, but they are the timing of the implementation of the EIP 1559 protocol and whether the Iron Finance, the rebooted, resurrected V2 of Iron Finance would maintain a TVL, total value locked capitalization, of at least $500 million as of the end of this month. Avi has been pretty much on target with his calls thus far, but we're going to have this kind of final recap and see where things stand. And Avi, let's jump right into it, starting with EIP. Tell us a little bit again about kind of what the basic underlying criterion is for this market, what it all has to do with, and what your call has been to date coming into this new week.
So EIP 1559 is a network upgrade for Ethereum, and they scheduled it for a particular block number, and you have blocks every 13 and a half seconds or so. So you were able to sort of project that it would be sometime August 4th, August 5th. And as it's gotten closer and closer to the date, there's been somewhat less variance. So it's been much, you'd be able to sort of more narrowly target when exactly it's going to, that particular block is going to go live.
And this one's been basically dwindling. It looks like it's sort of the short story here, right? It's been going from very likely to now almost certainly not going to happen by August 5th. And that's basically been your premise all along, is that it was less likely than the market thought. So again, just tell us kind of what you saw that the market was slower to catch up to, and you know, if there's any remaining risk here, or if this is really basically a lock at what, 97 cents. 97%
so
sure not to happen.
The interesting thing that we talked about last week was that this Ethereum developer who had some expertise in block timing, and he tweeted that he was buying this, and he bought around 7 cents. And he didn't say why he was.
In other words, he was betting that it would happen against the market. He was betting it would happen before August 5th, right? And he seemed to have some credibility, as you were saying. This is what you and I chatted about last week. Does he see something that no one else knows?
Yeah, so he put 2,400 into it, around 7 cents, but he didn't really elaborate. Now, I didn't think that he was. I did not think that he knew anything more than the market. He seemed to. Anyway, this week he came out and said, number one, he sold his position, and he wrote that even when he was buying it, he put in his tweet, he said it was a low probability event. So he wasn't. Mm-hmm. He wasn't even buying thinking that it was likely to happen. He just maybe thought it was more likely than 7%. The really interesting thing is that there were several large buyers that started buying the day of or the day after his tweet. And people came in with, at least one person had put over 100,000 into it, and at higher prices than 7 cents. People were paying 10, 15. I think it even hits 20 cents very briefly in like the day or two after his tweet. And again, it's hard to really know what people were thinking, but it seems probable that people saw the tweet and said, "Oh, this guy is a developer and knows what he's doing," and
Right.
so
Yeah, that
they
seems
assume, "Oh, this
plausible.
is
In fact, can we
probably."
bring up the price chart again? I saw his original tweet that kind of got people nervous was on July 22nd. I think that was last Thursday, which is a day before we recorded our last episode, if I'm not mistaken. And so, yeah, that's July 22nd. If we can bring up the market page, the EIP Polymarket price chart, there it is. So it's a little hard to see. Can we click over on the now, what is this? This is already a 1 week, or is this a no? This looks like it's a
It's 30
30-day.
days.
If we can go to
You go
like
to
a
7 day.
7-day chart, we might see a little better resolution here. So, okay, so it's still hard to tell because it's still relatively low probability. But 7/22, July 22nd, that's where he made the tweet, and as you can see, it did tick up there a fair bit in the day, a couple of days thereafter, and it's dwindled now in the last say 48, 72 hours, especially following Mr. Hancock's follow-up tweet. So in retrospect, does that seem to be, again, we were speculating, you and I, about that last week, whether there was anything more beyond this move, as you said, from 7 to even the low mid teens, and even briefly a bit higher than that. In retrospect, does it seem to just be people piling into just on blind faith, hoping that this developer might know something that the market doesn't?
Yeah, so my take is that he probably thought the odds, I think he wrote somewhere that he thought it was like 20% likely. Um, it wasn't entirely clear from his tweet. He said 80%, but I think he means 80% on the other side. So I think that was not the right probability at the time. But also because he wasn't explicit, people may have read his tweet and said, "Oh, this is probably a sure thing," and
Mm-hmm.
bought him based on that. And uh, anyway, after he wrote his later tweets and said he sold the position and he's no longer thinks it's going to happen, then the other people that bought him started dumping, and
Right.
they're really the ones that took the price back to 3 cents.
And in the meantime, it was
Now,
a nice opportunity for those who were bearish
yes.
on it, yourself included, to kind of load up into even larger positions. How big a net no position did you have by the time all was said and done here?
Oh, I don't know if I want to say. Um,
Significant though,
I
eh?
believe I believe I ended up either the top or the second top no holder by the time this was all over.
Okay,
Um,
very very large 6-figure position.
yeah,
Fair to say.
yeah.
Right.
Um, anyway, you want to bring up that chart. So this is a bit backwards. The hours left on the left side is times in the future or time moving forward. It's just how the spreadsheet worked when I set it up. But basically, every red dot is an average number of block times for a 24 average every 24 hours. And you can see it kind of hovers around 13 and a half, 13.4 seconds per block. And then the blue line is at each point, how fast would block times have to be through the end of the market in order to be able to hit this happening before August 5th at the deadline. And so up till about 2 weeks ago, so about 600 hours or so, we were just roughly on pace. Sometimes some days would be above pace, some days would be below pace. And then you can see right around 500 hours out from the final, from the deadline, you see the numbers started going up a lot. And then the numbers went down after that. And this is called the difficulty bomb, which is every 100,000 blocks, Ethereum makes the block time a little bit longer. And then it basically adds a certain fixed amount to the difficulty, which makes the blocks longer, and then it starts heading back down. You can actually sort of see this pattern once or twice. It's about every 2 weeks. So you get a big bump, and the block times go up, and it gets slower, and then it slowly goes down until the next one. And then the last bomb was actually this morning, several hours ago, on block 129, 12 million.9, every 100,000 blocks. And so the thing is, if you would look at the average block time of the last 6 months, you would get a number that, as of a few days ago, was still sort of sufficient to hit the deadline. And I think that some people were working on an overall average over a long period of time and sort of ignoring the difficulty bomb. And it's only really when you look at the numbers in detail and you see that the recent block times are longer than average, and they are moving back towards a lower number now, but that'll actually be over. So I would expect the next few days to be much closer to 13.7 or higher until it sort of goes back down a bit.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, for folks that are looking at this graph as you're discussing, you mentioned it's sort of backwards. So time is going from right to left there, right? As you're getting closer to the vertical axis on the left, that's expiration time, right? Time to August 5th, is it? So each of these vertical grid lines is, so 500 hours. So what's that, about 3 weeks? So as it gets closer, you see, as you were saying, average block time is actually going up as you get these difficulty bombs every couple of weeks. And so as you get closer and it's below average, that required average block time starts falling precipitously as we get really close. So it's easy to see the trend here. It was difficult, I think, for folks to see the trend a month or two ago, most of the way back on this graph, where, as you say, the blue line is mostly above that cluster of the daily average block times. And yet it sounds like the relatively simple, at least in retrospect, for me, a layman, relatively simple way to look at this is people just simply weren't incorporating the degree to which the block times would, as we get closer, raise that average above where that blue trend would need to be, which, again, as you come up on it here in the final days, becomes increasingly easy to see as it continues to trend above where it needs to be. The deficit for the remaining fewer 24-hour periods becomes even more extreme. So it sounds like your thesis here has really panned out, and it sounds like the answer to my other question earlier as to whether there's any real remaining risk in that 97-3 pricing is very likely no, right? I mean, it seems, is there any weird outside chance where this gets, thrown into total chaos, or can you pretty safely buy 97 here and expect to have a 3+% return in the span of whatever it is, about 10 days?
Yeah, I don't really see any remaining risk. This market should be trading at 99, 9.5. It should be 999, but there's some cost of capital. But there's no reason to be at 3 cents right now, except you still have the people that put 100,000 on. Yes, like a few days ago, they dumped like half their position or like a third of their position. They haven't dumped out completely yet, so that's why it's still over here. If those guys were to decide to get whatever cash they could for their money, then this would go back to 1 cent or lower. And
makes sense. Well, congratulations on this one. This is
sorry.
Go ahead.
It's going to be zero. So eventually it'll be zero. So it's going to go gradually to 1 cent. As if it's like a day or two out, then it'll be just completely obvious at that point. So you'll need like an absurd block time, like 12 seconds or less, to make it hit by then.
Well, congratulations on this. On this market, it sounds like it's played out exactly as you had foreseen, and it's going to accrue to your significant financial benefit. So nicely done on that one. Let's pivot, unless you have anything more to go over on this, to the iron finance market, which is where quite a bit of uncertainty still remains, at least going by the pricing. You can see this one has flipped back and forth a couple of times in just the last couple of weeks, with yes now again slightly favored. That it will be above 500 million, the total value locked on version 2 of Iron Finance. So folks that have been watching this series with us and following this market, even if they haven't been watching our series, are aware that this is tied to a couple of different metrics, right? An underlying coin price and then this TVL metric. So walk us through again, sort of the high level, what this is all about and how you watch these metrics to gauge, where it's trending.
So I have 3 things you're looking at. You're having the main metric that the market is on, which is what the TVL is. As of now, it's at 759. It's been declining for the last few days, but it went up a lot. So last week, it went from, when the market first opened, it went from 1.5 billion TVL to just under 500 million, and then it bounced up towards in the 800s, and now it's down to about 759. Now this is driven by people that want to get paid with the ICE token, and the ICE token is about 40 cents now, It's also bounced around a bunch from $1.80 when we taped the first show to down to 30 cents, and then back to 70 cents, and now it's down to 40 again. And in short, the higher the ICE token is, the higher the reward for people that have money in the TVL here, and vice versa. So as ICE drops, there's not enough rewards to attract money. And so right now, ICE is below the level where people are going to add more money in. And so it's been slowly draining out. And so it went. So in the last 24 hours, if you could pull up the app that Iron Finance, in the last 24 hours, you lost 37 million, right?
30. I've got
So
34 million, something like that. But that's shifting as the comp number from 24 hours ago shifts. But yeah, it's back on the downtrend after having swung back upward from below 500.
So this is a little below the pace that you'd need. You have 5 days left, so you'd need to go through 250, 260 million. You need to drop like 50 million, 60 million a day, give or take. And on the other hand, you still have that one whale they have something like 300 million in this. And I do expect them to pull out at some point, assuming we don't get another ICE pump. The current level is below the level where they've shown in the past they were willing to pull out. On the other hand, they may decide to stay in for another week just to see if there's another pump. Because if there was a pump, it doesn't cost them that much to leave the money in. It depends on what the cost of capital is.
And sorry to interrupt, but you said they currently have this whale about 300 million of that 750?
Yes.
So it's really quite dependent on them, isn't it? So if we assume they leave that 300 in, then of the other 450, you'd need 250 of that 450 to pull out, right? So you need a majority of the non-whale money to pull out in the next 5 days if the whale stays in. And if the whale pulls out, then you don't need any other money to come out. In fact, it can survive a little bit more money going in, right? So it's almost precisely tied, it would seem, to whether or not that whale pulls up stakes, before month end. I guess there's also the possibility they lighten up but don't pull everything out, which might put you closer to the line. But what's your sense? You said the ICE coin is now below that APR where they've tended to want to stay in, but they haven't yet pulled back out, at least not enough. So with ICE token currently around 40, is there kind of a magic number you're looking at here that you think would really send them to the hills and liquidate? Or is it really kind of a guessing game at this point?
If ICE stays at the current level, I think you see a gradual decline, but you probably end up like 600 million by the end of the week when the market ends. I think. And if ICE pumps, if you go up to 50 cents again, then it's just going to be impossible because people might not add more money, but they would leave the money in if you have the APR increase. I think what no really needs of it here is probably a decline to 30 cents. 35 could do it, but 30 is where you'd be the most comfortable. And 30 combined with another 5 days for people to pull, I think would be enough of a trigger for. I mean, you can look at the APRs now. So at the current price level of 40, you have the APR in the main pool is 18%, which is just not that great for this kind of project, especially when you have fees to go in and out. Or you have slippage in and you have fees to leave and whatever.
And is some of this tied to overall crypto prices? I mean, will ICE pump or sell off depending on how Bitcoin or Ethereum prices generally do? I mean, are you to some degree putting your faith in the overall tide of the crypto market here, or is this pretty untethered to that?
It's hard to say. I mean, you had this big ICE pump over the last 2 days when crypto was doing nothing. And then you had crypto just completely take off last night, and ICE didn't really respond to that. I mean, ICE went up a bit, but
not that well correlated, at least.
Yeah, one thing you would think is that if crypto is going up, then the other opportunity, the opportunity cost for having cash is probably higher, because when crypto is up, or even when crypto is volatile, like firms like Alameda can probably make a lot better use of cash, and so they may be slightly less likely to keep money in at a 18% annualized. But it is very possible that they only pull a partial amount. They originally had 800 million, and then they pulled out 500 million, and they pulled out 100 million, and they went down gradually. And then as the price went back up, they put money in gradually. So I would sort of expect, if they pull, it's not going to be 300 million at once. It's going to be 50 million, and then another 50 million, or 100 million. And they're going to sort of leave themselves the option to still get some ice in case it pumps.
Yeah. So in light of all this, with this market on Polymarket is currently trading at 59 cents. Again, this is up from basically 50.50 just a few hours ago. Although that had represented a tightening from 24 hours ago. We look basically around the same where we are now, sort of mid 50s on yes. In other words, market saying slightly more likely than not to remain above 500 million at month end. What do you make of this pricing? Well, first of all, I guess do you have a net position in this market one way or another? And do you feel like price is about right, or is the market viewing this, pricing it in an inefficient way?
I have a net position I know I got much earlier. I haven't been adding too much to it. I added a bit when it was at in the 40 to 45 range. It's just very hard to say. The market does seem to be following the price of ICE somewhat. When you had ICE drop a bunch, even though TVL was still not declining that much, you had the market go closer to 50-50. And then when ICE went back up, the market seems more confident. But also you have, as time goes on, you have less and less chances. And that the chance of no decays, unless you have no need sort of a certain pace of ICE declining and TVL declining. And every day that passes without some trigger, it's just you're running out of time. I could go to 30 tomorrow, and if the TVL only drops 50 million a day for another 4 days, you can still barely come out above 200 million. So you need things to happen. You need them to happen relatively fast at this point, and it's certainly still in the realm of plausible here. It's just very hard to price this exactly.
Do you feel like the TVL number has gotten a little bit less volatile in the last couple of weeks? And when we first talked about this in the first installment about 2 weeks ago, again, it was then TVL was slightly above 1.5 billion. And that was really when I first started looking at this closely, after you kind of gave us all, including myself, this tutorial on air. But I sort of started keeping an eye on ICE and the TVL number. And very shortly after you were on is when it tanked from over 1.5 to under 500 million. So about a 70% decrease really quickly, following, some sell-off in the ICE token, but not too dissimilar from the sell-off we've seen from, say, the 23rd to 25th. It dropped again from 75 cents to just over 30 cents. So it dropped by about 50%. And you didn't see nearly as large a corresponding decrease then in the TVL. Is it just that most, or a larger percentage now of what remains is in the hands of Alameda, a large, maybe more sophisticated, less reactionary holder? Or is just the longer the V2's kind of been around, people are a little less, freaking out over every little gyration in the ICE price?
Well, one is that Alameda has always been a big part of this pool. They were like 50%, more than 50% when it was at 1.5. And they've also been a big part of the drop. So when they went from 800 million to 300 million, that's a 500 million drop. And overall, the TVL has gone down 750 million, right, from 1.5 to 750 now. So they represent something like 2/3 of the drop in aggregate over that time. And they also represented a lot of the increase. When it was at 480 million, they had almost nothing in the pool. They've gone up 250 million since then. So, in other words, almost all of the net increase since the low of the pool has been this one whale account. Now, it's not entirely up to them. If they would pull out everything, you would see some people add more money in just because the APR would go up when they pull.
Sure.
And if they added a bunch in, other people would pull. But those effects are delayed. And there's definitely been discontinuous. Like when they pull out 50 million, you don't get 50 million replaced instantly. It's maybe that other people will just pull slightly slower. And instead of going down 25 million a day, let's say, if that was the rate, then you would only go down 10 million a day because there wasn't as much of a trigger.
Right.
There is something to the fact that
go
people might be somewhat less willing to pull it, to go in and out quickly. There's sort of a thing like in the first few days where the token might moon and you might you have the potential for a windfall. So it makes somewhat more sense to go in on the margins versus now, where if you go in, you'll make your 20% annualized probably for a week or two, which is not too exciting to people anymore.
Sure.
But it also doesn't make sense necessarily to pull when you have still a fee that takes up a half a day or whatever of your earnings. You might just want to give it another few days. And that's what I think Alameda is doing. I don't think Alameda would enter at this price, but they may not want to pull until it's clear. So like it's entirely possible that we see another 3 days and then Alameda says, okay, we're done, and they'll take out 200 million.
Right. And yet, other than for the Polymarket market, there's no magic to that August 1st deadline, right? So it's not as though Alameda is going to be looking at this much more closely and making a go or no go decision by next weekend as this deadline approaches. This has nothing to do with the project itself from a technological or kind of economic perspective, right? So if it's kind of quiet and Alameda's disposition increasingly seems to be, let's sort of wait and see, even if it's not as attractive a price, August 1st could quietly come and go, especially since it's a Saturday night. July 31st going into August 1st, if I have that right, without anything happening. So, I mean, if you're taking the short side here, betting or putting up 41 cents to go on the short side at current levels, is that basically the case, the thesis that you're speculating on a big enough crash in the price, and maybe not even a cataclysmic crash, but a big enough erosion in that price over the next few days that it forces Alameda to say, okay, enough is enough. Not only will we not get in at this price, we want to pull a big enough amount that we're going to get back under that 500.
Yeah, I think you basically need to crash to 30 or below. And if that happens, then it's very likely that this goes under 500. And then even at the current price, there's still somewhat of a chance. But to turn those into probabilities and say whether it adds up to over 40 or over and under whatever the current market price is going to be difficult. Right. I think it was much easier.
And how?
The first time when you knew it was going to drop from 1.5 billion to much lower, you just didn't know how much. It was much easier buy. Now it's less time. Now it's just harder to price.
Yeah. And how quickly would it need to happen? I mean, you've been watching Alameda's reaction to the coin price. If we dropped to say 20 cents, but it didn't happen until Saturday afternoon, would you want to plow into the no side here, or is that, does the TVL tend to lag the ICE move by a sufficient amount that this is sort of done and dusted by, say, Thursday or Friday?
And certainly Friday, I would not be comfortable betting on a large decrease that's happened within a day. Thursday, maybe if I got a good enough price for it, if I got like 10, 20 cents. Again, it's hard to say. Like if you just sort of follow the current decline, then by Thursday this could be at like 600 million, let's say. And obviously it's much easier. It's still hard to drop 100 million in 2 days, but there it's much more plausible than to drop 300 million or 250 million.
Right.
So if the decline stops, if we stay at 750 in 3 days, then it's going to be really difficult. If we get in 3 days, I sort of expect they're going to be at like 650 at the current rate, but you might have Alameda pull 50 million, you might not. It's hard to get too exact again with this kind of time.
Sure. Yeah, hard to put down exact numbers around it, but it sounds like the strategy here is that
they may release iron lending. I don't think it's going to happen before the end of the month, but I haven't followed that super closely. If they do that, then you probably get both a pump in the governance token, and potentially might include anything from the lending platform under their TVL. That could be good to watch. It's a few days out, so I don't know if they specifically plan to release this sooner or later. I think they said end of July, so who knows what that means,
Oh, interesting. That's their most recent signal on that. That would be end of July.
That was what they said like a week or two ago. I have not followed.
Okay.
I do not know if there's a specific launch date or not. I haven't
Right.
followed. This is just something I felt I should
But
mention.
were that to happen, presumably it would inspire a big enough pump, or at least ward off an imminent decline, to the extent that the
Yeah.
true, the fair value of the yes side here would be significantly north of where it would be otherwise. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, even if you only attract 100 million in TVL to this lens product, if that gets thrown in over here, then that just makes the
Mm-hmm.
barrier much harder. And I
Right.
would think they can get 100 million into their lens product if they just clone like AAV or one of the other lens stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
they have a bunch of followers, so
And
they could probably get
I
decent
guess
TVL
unlike
here.
Alameda, I guess there is then a little bit of magic then to the coincidental August 1st expiration date here from a development timeline, right? Because if they said end of July, and if they perceive some value in hitting their own expressed deadline of having that lending product up by month
Yeah.
end,
Well,
there's a plausible case to be made to say that yeah, they're really working hard on getting it out before then, and maybe that helps
could be.
shore up that
Well, it's
TVL.
always
But
been good on
again,
Polymarket to bet against software projects being released on time.
mm-hmm.
Just, I mean, the IP market, the optimism market.
Right.
There's an alpha market on whether the Cardano testnet, whether they're going to have
Yes.
smart
Right.
contracts on the Cardano mainnet by
Mm-hmm.
October or something.
Right.
Um,
So
I
yeah,
don't
have
really
you
have
perceived a
that's better.
general market bias towards project optimism? I mean, obviously, Polymarket being sort of a crypto native market platform to begin with, maybe has more disproportionately crypto enthusiasts, people who are more inclined to believe in the pronouncements and the prospects of the developers of various projects. Have you detected that kind of being a repeatedly recurring price bias or an inefficiency here that you could make sort of a more simplistic bet of all else being equal, bet against project optimism?
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable thesis. I know there's at least one person that just does this huge no bets on that exact thesis that things always take longer than they
Hmm.
expect it to. Um, he made a bunch of money in the EIP market as well, including the first EIP market, which was on July 31st, before they
Right.
decided to set a later block. He
Yeah.
made like 50,000 on that, so that was. There are some people that are using that exact strategy to
Hmm.
great effect.
Interesting. Well, any parting thoughts here in terms of how people should play it? I mean, it sounds like the general tactics here are similar to what repeat viewers have heard before. Keep an eye on that ICE price, as we get closer to the deadline, the time frames compress a little bit, and you need not only for one thing to happen, but for then the knock-on effects of that to also happen, and to happen within this increasingly tight time frame. So the dynamics are shifting a little bit, but it's overall sounds like a similar story to what you've told us before. Look out for cratering ICE price. Keep a close eye on Alameda, and keep an eye on the clock.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing is you don't really have enough issuance at this point to push ICE down a ton.
Mm,
So if you assume that nobody trades it and you only have new ICE getting sold and that's it, then it goes down something like 30, 40%. Um, you'd have to double check the size of liquidity pools and how much is being made per day. Get an updated figure, but that's somewhere in the ballpark, which is probably enough if that happened today. I don't know if it's enough if that happens over the next week.
hmm Yeah, it makes sense. And yet it's still, you look just a few or more than a few hours ago, but less than 24 hours ago, this thing was still down just over 30 cents. So, and it sounds like from what you're saying, if we were to get back to the level and stick there, that's probably enough to make the TVL sink under that threshold in time, right?
Yeah, it's just a really interesting market that it's less than a week out and it's still hard to say what's
Right.
going to happen.
Yeah, yeah. This kind of coin flip pricing and the constant flipping back and forth between yes and no being favored is really keeping this one being pretty interesting. Let's see the total volume here. Is this at all surprising to you? The total volume is not higher here, given how high the EIP volume went. I think that was a couple 100,000. That we've only got 41,000 on this with just 5 days to expiration and rough, somewhere near coin flip pricing.
Well, there's just not that many people I think that want to bet on this. and uh, the liquidity is also not super high. The EIP liquidity is over 10 times as much,
Right.
and we had a lot of new accounts that were betting on that. And actually, I think the EIP volume is over 1 million by now.
Yeah. I'm actually looking at this over 1.5 million, 1.55 million. And as you say, on liquidity of nearly 80,000, where here the liquidity is less than 5,000. So yeah, that can push it down. Is there any play here to be made simply by being an LP on this market, just blindly providing liquidity, or is this one too much of a trap here, where a spike or a dump in the ICE price could put you on the wrong side of that?
I think another 2 days or so, it's hard to see this moving too much in one direction. Like even if
Mm-hmm.
Alameda pulls, let's say 100 million out, you'd still be at it would still be a close case. You would probably move from like 60-40 odds to 50-50 odds maybe. It's hard to
Mm-hmm.
say. Um, it seems reasonable to provide like a small amount of liquidity. You don't want to get too big, but um, for like another day or two, I'd expect you to still see some decent value, and uh, don't expect the price to move too much. It can move to like 66, and it can move to like 50,
Right.
unless something. I don't think that Alameda would pull 300 million all at once, because they didn't do that the last time. They went from 800
Mm-hmm.
million down to a low of 60 million, and then they went back up to 300 million. And they did that gradually. They pulled out 100 million at a time, 180 million at a time, and they put in another
Mm-hmm.
75 million. They put in 60 million, and until it added up, and now they have 300. Um, so
So,
they do
so
seem
they're
to be doing it
adjusting their position
gradually.
pretty frequently. Like how on a given day
It's
they're tweaking it, or only kind of when the ICE
no,
price moves significantly.
it's every couple of days that they'll do a big move. I
Okay.
mean, they do every few hours. They redeem the ice and they dump it. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so they take the rewards and they convert it into cash. So
Right.
and probably most of the other people are also doing the same. And so that puts the downward pressure on ice. But then you
Mm-hmm.
have some other people that just want to speculate on the ice price for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason. I mean, clearly this ice is not going to be worth much long term, because they have like a 10 trillion or something eventual supply. Like the fully diluted market cap is just completely absurd. Um,
Yeah.
so I don't know why people would buy it, but for a short term play, who knows? You could have bought at 30 and sold at 70, and everybody wants to
Yeah.
be that
Gosh.
guy who
So
bought at
40
30 and sold at
cents
70.
is that is 40
Yeah.
cents on a coin. There's eventually going to be 10 trillion of. Yeah. That is either going to go through a lot more dilution, or is going to be a hell of a valuable project by the time all is said and done. Um, Great. Well, Avi, thank you so much again for your insights on both of these markets. Again, the EIP one has really worked out well for you, and for anyone who followed you into this trade and was, had the opportunity to digest your analysis here and elsewhere, and hopefully your continued thoughts on this Iron Finance project and the TVL tracking here will enable folks to do likewise. So I want to thank everyone for joining us on this third installment of the crypto trilogy here. Avi, any final thoughts, final words that you'd like people to consider, or is it basically uh, follow the ice and wonder about what the whales will do, and beyond that, it's a little bit of a crapshoot at this point.
Yeah, I don't really have anything further on ice. In general, for Polymarket, I wanted to say they just started the tournaments today. And basically they had 32 people, and they like each get seeded with $100, and like every week they like have specific matchups. Um, and I mean, it's too late to join, but I think it should be fairly interesting to watch what people are doing
Yeah,
when
and
they're
how would you
competing
recommend
for
people
like.
follow along with that?
So Polymarket Wales, which I assume most people are going to be familiar with, has a page set up specifically for the tournament, and you can look at that, and I'll have all the brackets, and I'll send you a link. You can tweet it out and include it. Um,
Thanks. Yeah, I will do that. We'll put it in the notes, but just so I can put it in the audio here too. I believe it's polymarketwales.info.
yes, and
Indeed.
then
Yeah,
slash,
polymarketwales.info, and then you'll see a tournament tab when you
yeah,
get to
or
that. So
slash
jump on that. You'll see
tournaments.
the full bracket there and the performance. Thank you for bringing that up. We'll see if we can get some of the contenders on in future episodes.
Yeah.
Well, it might be a fun way to
Well,
kind of
I
follow
am
along.
one of them, and I'm up like $5 now. look at it on $100.
Oh,
Just
excellent. Let
launched
me
2 hours
see.
ago.
I'm bringing it up
It's on
myself.
the
Yep, I
right
see you're at
side.
104.99. Yep, there you are. So good luck to you on this, making it to the Sweet 16 round. How often? Like, what's the marking period here? When will we have? When will we
It's
advance
weekly.
to round two? Weekly. Okay.
Yeah, every Monday at like 10 a.m. or something, it's gonna, which depends on how much you made or lost since then, and then half of them get eliminated and so on.
Excellent. Well, best of luck to you. Just reviewing to see a lot of familiar names. So hopefully we'll be able to have some of your fellow contestants on as the ranks get whittled down in the coming weeks. So good luck to you, Avi. Thank you again for your insights here. Thank you everyone for tuning in to hear Avi's latest thoughts on these two markets. Again, please reach out via Twitter, DM us with any questions or suggestions you have for future episodes where, again, we are at Old Bull TV. There you see it on your screen. Until next time, happy trading, and we will see you next time.